These are the stories making the headlines now. It's the 13th day of pro-democracy protests in Egypt. Once again, Liberation Square in Cairo is filling up with demonstrators. The largest opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood, is due to hold talks with the government shortly, but some protesters seem determined to carry on.
The government is not expressing the Egyptian people at all.
They will be staying here, and for the others, yes, maybe they can start outside, because many think that they need to go to their work, and life should go like it was.
People against the president of Egypt still stay here until the president of Egypt leaves the country.
And within the last half hour, Egypt's banks have just reopened, but the doors will only be open for 3.5 hours. Weeks of unrest have paralysed businesses and brought the lucrative tourism industry to a halt. The trial has begun in Iran of 3 US citizens charged with espionage. Their families say they were hiking in northern Iraq when they were arrested in July 2009. Tehran initially accused them of illegally crossing into Iran and added spying charges later. The trial is being held behind closed doors, and it's not clear if any of the defendants are in attendance. At least 2 people were killed in Tunisia when police opened fire on a crowd of demonstrators in the northern town of Kef. State media says the clashes erupted after an officer allegedly hit a woman during a protest outside a police station. Another 17 people were injured. The Interior Ministry says the local police chief has been arrested. Rescue efforts in flood-stricken areas of Sri Lanka are being hampered by heavy rains. Officials say up to 14 people have been killed, with hundreds of thousands of homes flooded. The National Disaster Management Centre is struggling to cope. Many of the areas underwater were badly hit by a wave of monsoon rains just last month. Well, those are the headlines. We'll be back at the top of the hour, so do stay with us.
January 2011. History unfolding.
And now things are getting worse by the moment.
This film tells the story of 5 days when the people of Egypt broke through a barrier of fear they had known for a generation and rose in revolt against their president.
Police are knocking on our door. The police is on their way up to our office. I will stay on the air if I can until the police come. We're going to keep these images for you guys live until we are actually forced off the air, either by the police or if our signal is somehow interrupted.
Small networks of activists were gearing up for mass action. They'd been agitating against President Mubarak's autocratic rule for years. But they never had attracted mass support until another Arab country rose up against its tyrant.
The protests haven't kicked off just yet. They're expected to start in the coming couple of hours. This is going to be a real test whether online activism in Egypt can translate into real action. Anger has been on the rise in Egypt for the past couple of years, but we have seen similar calls fizzle out. The main difference now is that these calls are coming after what happened in Tunisia, which seems to have not only inspired activists, but actually ordinary Egyptians, a dozen of whom we have seen set themselves on fire in copycat self-immolation similar to the one that had sparked the uprising in Tunisia.
Their demands simple: political freedoms, an end to state corruption, and a better quality of life for the impoverished population.
Anger had been brewing in Egypt for years now. The last 2 years, we witnessed several strikes in the country, rising unemployment, sectarian tension was on the rise.
Well, I think anyone who's lived or spent time in Egypt will tell you there were plenty of signs that suggested that people in Egypt were growing increasingly frustrated. But I don't think anyone could have genuinely predicted that thousands of Egyptians would defy and challenge the government and its various security apparatuses.
President Mubarak and his National Democratic Party are apparently as secure in power as ever on the eve of the planned demonstrations.
What happened that day was that tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of Egyptians, different parts of the country took to the streets. Not stationary protests as we were used to seeing here in Egypt. They were actually marching from one neighborhood to another at the heart of Cairo.
Are we expecting to see trouble?
It's difficult to judge at this early stage.
They started marching onto different parts of the capital, the strategic buildings perhaps that symbolized their plight or their agony, the ruling National Party headquarters, the state television, the foreign ministry.
The ruling party is the symbol of that as far as protesters are concerned and activists are concerned, which is why they're trying to stage this protest now in front of the ruling party.
Just listen to the chants roaring in downtown Cairo, the hundreds of people walking to the streets. It's unprecedented for people to march to the streets this way as an act of protest without security trying to prevent them.
The people we've seen taken to the streets today are not the 50, 60 activists that we've been seeing protesting in Egypt for the past 5-6 years. These were normal Egyptians.
Thousands marched peacefully in the morning. Their ultimate goal, to reach the city's heart, Tahrir Square. But then scuffles break out with riot police. They attempt to divide and conquer.
Indeed, Darren, this news just coming in. In fact, I'm just getting a chance to read the statement that's been issued now by the Interior Ministry. The first official reaction since the morning, blaming the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood group.
The government, quick to seize the political capital, accused their longtime enemy of inciting unrest.
The numbers estimates were around 20,000, but I cannot be that sure. We outnumbered them, which is a very new thing, a new experience to us. When we approached Tahrir Square, police tried to stop us, but our numbers just marched through them and they chanted peaceful, peaceful till they passed through all the police barriers. Definitely not the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood announced that they will not be part of this.
We're tired. Stop inflation. We're suffering. We love Egypt and we defend Egypt, but we've had enough.
Voices roaring into the night. Egyptian men, women and children called for the resignation of the president.
They shot at us. They shot at us. Why? I don't know. Who are we? The enemy? Am I an enemy of the state? I came here to ask just for rights. I came here to ask for a home.
Shortly after midnight, that's when it became clear to everybody that the police, their patience was wearing thin.
A new dawn in Cairo, and a policing strategy in Egypt on a whole new scale.
After a day of mass protests in Egypt, the government has banned any further demonstrations. And there's a warning to activists of a tough crackdown if people do take to the streets again.
I'm very close to the press center. The scene itself was really calm, but right next to it is the Supreme Court, and there were a group of less than 1,000 protesters completely encircled by police. They beat them with the sticks and they shot tear gas bombs, and the whole demonstration was separated and they were running after the protesters.
So, Mona, are the police responding to violent protests from the crowd, or what are they doing?
They're at a loss how to respond, so they are responding in the only way they know right now, which is beating up and completely turning violent and aggressive.
Reports flood in of detentions and violence, changing the mood to one of defiance. Our reporters witnessed the use of excessive force.
I actually have to move. I have to move. Protesters are pelting a riot squad truck with Don't.
An official 6 p.m. curfew is ignored, and by evening, the mission to reach Tahrir Square brings together at least 2,000 people.
That square has been cordoned off today by the security forces. They're not allowing people to get anywhere near it. It is the symbolic heart of Cairo, and the word Tahrir means liberation.
Sure enough, by night, our cameras capture the scene in Tahrir. Protesters have broken